Now, this is directly relevant for any borrowers who are currently in grad school and who will continue to borrow more after July 2026. My name is George Sardakis. I'm an associate at Fitz & Hirsch Financial Services. And lately there's been a lot of confusion about navigating new student loan legislation, especially with important deadlines coming up. So we're going to go over the new Repayment Assistance Plan, or the RAP, that takes effect on July 1 of 2026, which is the biggest income-driven repayment plan change in years. And this affects everyone who has federal student loans, every borrower, current and future. And what we're going to go over is the background of the plan, the math, the pros, the cons behind it, who wins, who loses, and what next steps should be taken in order to make sure that we're staying ahead. Now, the RAP comes from the elimination of the SAVE plan, which was implemented and introduced by the Biden administration. It officially terminated that plan in March of 2026, which led borrowers who are currently enrolled in the SAVE plan to be thrown into administrative forbearance and pause their payments. The RAP was first introduced with the signing of the Big Beautiful Bill back on July 4th of 2025, which had officially terminated the SAVE plan and also created the July 1, 2026 launch date for the RAP. And now the other important date to remember is that the PAYE, the pay as you earn, and the ICR, the income contingent repayment plans, are set to sunset on July 1 of 2028. And this affects the longer term landscape after July of 2028, whereby the RAP plan is set to be the only income-driven repayment option left after the last two sunset on that date. And understanding the RAP plan isn't optional. It's something that we all have to learn, being that it is the future of federal student loan repayment options and plans, at least into the foreseeable future. The first step in understanding the RAP is understanding its calculation. In the past, legacy IDR plans used what was called a poverty shield, or basically the poverty level was used as a basis for the calculation in years prior, in plans prior, and subtracted from adjusted gross income. There was then a multiplier that was added to that, which was then used to calculate our annual expenses, and then we would figure out the monthlies from there. The RAP plan removes that poverty shield, and what it does is it essentially calculates our payments based on AGI from the very first step. So what we see here after that is a sliding scale from 1% to 10%, and it's bracketed by $10,000. So for every $10,000 increase in income, we have an additional 1 percentage point increase in our annual payment, which is then divided by 12 to calculate for the months. This calculation is a fundamental departure from every IDR plan that has preceded it, mainly because of the elimination of the poverty shield. The IDRs that predate the RAP plan use the poverty shield as the basis for the calculation to essentially help lower income people and favor lower income people, in helping to create a more budget-friendly student loan repayment scale. The RAP plan is being based off AGI from the go. Yes, the calculation is more straightforward, but it reduces and eliminates that poverty shield. One thing to remember, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, is there is a minimum monthly payment for the RAP plan for those who make less than $10,000 a year. The additional leg to the RAP plan is the dependent credit. Now, for each qualifying dependent, the monthly payment gets reduced for the borrower by $50 a month. So if someone has 2 kids, they would get a $100 credit. The other idea here is the aforementioned payment floor is $10 a month. So even with a dependent credit, we still have that $10 minimum. So if we have enough dependents to get us to a $0 a month payment, because of that implemented $10 a month floor, we're going to end up paying $10, not $0. Why would we enroll in the RAP plan? What are some of the pros? Well, the first one is that there's what's called no negative amortization. So if our monthly payment doesn't cover the monthly interest, the government's going to subsidize the gap. So if our monthly payment is $80 and there's an additional $20 a month in interest that is above and beyond that $80, the government will subsidize that so the loan doesn't grow. Now, this is a big win for any graduate borrowers with large balances relative to their income. So if I'm a new grad and I have $100,000 in debt, but I only make $50,000 a year, having this interest subsidy is definitely going to help make sure that my balance doesn't grow. The second pro to this is a $50 principal guarantee. At least $50 a month of our payments are going to go towards principal every month. If a payment is too small to chip away at the $50, the government will top it off, and that goes again towards that interest subsidy that we were just talking about. What this means for borrowers is that borrowers who are enrolled on the RAP plan have a guaranteed real progress going towards their balances on a monthly basis. The third pro is that it's more simple to understand. There's no annual poverty guideline lockup required, and being that the poverty rate does increase on an annual basis, there's no recalculation based on poverty level. There's no discretionary income subtraction where, depending on the plan, there was a different multiplier. Like for the IBR plan or the ICR plan, there's a different multiplier for what's called discretionary income. It's essentially based solely on your AGI, and that's it. So that creates a predictability and a huge plus for financial planning in that you understand or have a better understanding, at least over the medium term, what your payments are expected to be. The final pro is that borrowers still maintain PSLF eligibility. So if we have a borrower who is working in a municipality or a non-for-profit or some kind of government organization, or is a firefighter or a police officer or a nurse at a local hospital, their payments continue to be applied towards PSLF forgiveness. Now, PSLF, for those who don't know, is public service loan forgiveness. Essentially, 120 qualifying payments, which means I have to work for a non-for-profit organization or some kind of government or state entity. If I maintain those payments while working for those government organizations or whatever organizations for 120 payments, the remaining balance of my student loans are going to be forgiven tax-free. Now, for new borrowers after July of 2026, the RAP is the only IDR plan that's available. What are some of the cons? Why would I not want to enroll in the RAP? Well, for starters, there's no poverty level income shield. So under the new IBR, about $24,000 of income is fully protected for any single borrower before any calculation of repayment. However, under the new RAP, every dollar of AGI is in play from the very first dollar. So this really impacts lower to middle income borrowers with modest to high balances. They're going to pay more under RAP compared to IBR. The second reason, or the second con, is that there's now a 30-year implemented forgiveness timeline versus 20 or 25 from previous IDR plans. The IBR, the income-based repayment plan, would forgive student loans after 20 years of payments, 20 or 25 years depending on if you had a new or an old IBR. Under the RAP, it's a standardized 30-year forgiveness for everybody who's enrolled on that plan, except for if you're PSLF, then you have 120 payments. Now, the other thing to consider, and this is the same for previous and legacy IDRs, is that forgiveness under RAP is also considered taxable income in the year in which it is forgiven. So if I have $12,000 in student loans forgiven under my RAP and I make $100,000 a year, I'm going to be looked at as making $112,000 of taxable income in the year which my student loans are forgiven. Now, the third con is that high debt professional borrowers may pay more. Some professions that may fit into this camp would be doctors, lawyers, dentists, MBAs, any high earning professional. They have what's called a high debt to income ratio. they have to go to school for longer, therefore they have taken out more student loans. Even though their income is modest to high, they still have a very high level of debt compared to the income that they're making. Since there's no income shield and now a 30-year timeline to forgiveness, that's significantly more out-of-pocket payments versus a 20-year IBR, and that's something that financial professionals and planners have to account for. The other thing to consider with regards to this third point is that monthly payments may look more manageable in the short term because we have smaller payments, but over the longer term, that results in a higher lifetime cost to the borrower. The fourth con is that any new loans that are taken after July 1 of 2026 automatically locks those borrowers into the RAP plan. They don't have a choice. That includes people who are exploring grad school starting in the summer of 26 or fall of 26. The RAP will also become the only IDR option for all loans, including old ones. Old loans, even if they're grandfathered into old plans, you're going to end up having to get moved over to the RAP. And that also means that you may lose any forgiveness credits that you had in legacy IDR plans. Now, this is directly relevant for any borrowers who are currently in grad school and who will continue to borrow more after July 2026. With all of this being said, who wins, who loses? RAP, from what it seems like, will tend to win out for lower income borrowers with large balances, being that the interest subsidy and principal guarantee will be very valuable to them in helping them make sure that payments go towards principal and their loans aren't growing. It's going to help with borrowers who have multiple dependents. So if I have 2 or 3 kids, I get $100 or $150 in dependent credits, which can then stack and help to reduce my monthly payments. Has to win for new borrowers after July of 2026, being that there's no other IDR option. And it also benefits PSLF pursuing borrowers because they can continue to maintain their PSLF status under RAP. It's not necessarily in favor for single borrowers with moderate to high income and modest balances. It's not particularly favorable for borrowers who are targeting any kind of IDR forgiveness because of that new 30-year runway and the potential loss of forgiveness credits under legacy IDRs. And it also doesn't necessarily favor borrowers whose payments are already covers interest. Now, this is directly relevant for any borrowers who are currently in grad school and who will continue to borrow more after July 2026. This is mainly because they're not really going to benefit from interest subsidies or the principal guarantees that the RAP offers. When you take a step back and we evaluate the RAP, there's 5 main points to remember. The first is that the RAP does launch July 1 of 2026, which replaces SAVE and will be the sole IDR once the other legacy plans have been phased out in 2028. The second is that it uses a 1% to 10% sliding scale, which is used to calculate your payments based on your adjusted gross income. The third is that the big advantages that we had discussed is that there's no negative amortization. There's a $50 monthly principal guarantee and it's PSLF eligible. The big disadvantages, number 4, is that there's no income protection. We don't have that poverty shield. There's a 30-year forgiveness runway versus 20 or 25 years from legacy IDRs. And the remaining balance of the student loans that is forgiven is taxable income in the year that it is forgiven, just like legacy IDRs. And the fifth and final point is that whether RAP is a win for you or not necessarily in favor depends on a couple of different situations. It depends on your family size, it depends on your household, it depends on your loan balance, your income. There are a couple of variables here at play. So what this means is that we should continue to stay informed over the next couple of months, at least through the summer of 2026, to understand the RAP and if it's worth enrolling, or if we should find some alternative for the time being before RAP becomes the sole IDR. we have to understand that there are complex situations here when it comes to PSLF planning, when it comes to grad school planning, when it comes to Parent Plus loan planning, when it comes to understanding different strategies for funding college and higher education. There are professionals who are here to help and who do understand student loan legislation. So make sure that we take advantage of those resources and make sure that we're staying informed. With all of that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope this helps to deliver some kind of understanding of the RAP plan, especially with the July 1st deadline coming up. Thank you so much.